It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Tuesday, August 29th, 2023, and you know what that means. It's time to get nerdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 280 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. I am Lam, also known as Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm joined by my comrade in gaming commentary, the Miggity Mac, also known as Maction. Mac, that's a nice shirt. Is that a Doom t-shirt you're wearing?
I can see where you would get that idea, but it is in fact a Mega Man t-shirt in the style of Doom.
I only saw the top of it. Where did you get that? What's the story behind that shirt? I like it.
Great question. I'm afraid I don't even recollect where I got it. I might have picked it up from one of those t-shirt a-day sites like T-Fury or something like that. But yeah, I am a sucker for Mega Man themed t-shirts.
Aren't we all? I wish I had a cooler t-shirt on today, but you know, it is what it is. What's new with you, man? How have things been?
Oh, dude, this week has been interesting. I bring a cautionary tale from our friend, the Nerd Next Door, who was gearing up to record a YouTube video. And you know, they do like one or two a year if you're lucky. And got through the recording, and sadly, their recording software was not taking the audio from their good microphone, but taking it from their webcam instead. Yeah. So, looks like time to re-record. So, cautionary tales. Also, last week, I had cut the tip of my finger on a mandolin slicer, slicing some vegetables. And this week, I burned a finger on the other hand on a soldering iron trying to fix a thing. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, but I feel like I'm falling to pieces.
You're not going to be able to game anymore.
Yeah, I know. What am I going to do? So, yeah, I would say there have been some really great things happening. Good food, good times, good games. But I think for some strange reason, catastrophic failure seems to be the theme of this weekend. And I'm excited to turn that all around now that I'm here with you, Mr. Nice Guy. You're my good luck charm. Things are looking up.
I appreciate that. Well, I had some good, not catastrophic failures, but I don't know if you'd call it catastrophic wins. That's kind of an oxymoron. I had some wins lately. And this weekend I decided to go out with a good friend of mine who is actually a listener on the show and do some retro game shopping. And we hit several stores in the city. I think we went to 6 different stores on Saturday. And I'm all about those deals, Mac. If I'm buying retro games, I want to be getting them for a good price. I don't want to be overpaying. And so I use pricecharting.com to check prices. Now, here's what I found. First game that I found, NES game, Tecmo Super Bowl. Now, whether you're a sports ball fan or not, this is a classic football game that even a sports fan or non-sports fan can enjoy. It's a freaking awesome game. It actually has real player names, I believe. And controls are super tight. Call your plays before it's time. Pick this bad boy up, Mac, for $9.99. And then immediately went to another store, saw it on the shelf for $24.99. I got a great deal on that game. Now, another game that I had on my wish list was this bad boy, and it's Castlevania 3. Now, in my opinion, Castlevania 3 is the best of the NES Castlevanias. They had perfected the formula. They really got things right, and so picked that up for pretty much retail. But, you know, I passed up on a lot of different games that were out there. I've got to get a good deal when I'm buying these old NES games, and the collection continues to grow. Mac, and that meant that we hooked up the NES, played some games with the kids. It was a good Saturday night. On that note, I say we do what we do best and hop right up in that gaming news, man. What do you think about that?
Let's do it. Mr. Nice Guy, what is good in video gaming?
There's so much that's good, and there's only really one story I want to share today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to episode 280 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. Mac, there was some big news last week. We record once a week, so this happened, like the day after we recorded, I believe, or two. This is on GameSpot.com. It's about the new PlayStation handheld device that's coming. So much to discuss surrounding this. By Eddie Makic. Sony has officially announced the name and price of its upcoming Project Q handheld streaming device for PS5 games. The system is called PlayStation Portal, and it will cost $200. It is set to release sometime later this year. Portal streams games from your PS5, so it's not a dedicated gaming device like Sony's PSP or PS Vita, but it is a way to play high-fidelity games on the toilet or in bed from your PS5. The system features adaptive triggers and haptic feedback, just like PS5's DualSense controller. It sports an 8-inch LCD screen that can reach up to 1080p, 60 frames per second, provided the Wi-Fi connection is strong and stable enough. So here's the kicker, Mac. Sony said PlayStation Portal is aimed at people who live in homes where the TV is frequently occupied, or if they just want to play PS5 games in a different setting inside the same house. The PlayStation Portal uses your existing PS5 game library, but PlayStation VR 2 games are not supported. And then, Mac, it's important to note with this, PlayStation Portal has a 3.5mm audio jack for wired audio. It does not, however, use Bluetooth. However, the system has its own proprietary audio solution that is currently only supported by 2 new Pulse headphones and earbuds from Sony. So, I want to get your perspective as a retro gamer. I know you mentioned last week you were going to pick up that new Atari potentially, and I'm curious, do you ever come up in scenarios in your home where, maybe you want a game, but you have people over, or your wife is wanting to watch TV, and so you have to, sacrifice your gaming time? Is that something that comes up in the Maction household?
Yes, but not often from people coming over. Please come over and visit sometime. It's so lonely. But for other reasons, yeah. Now, that being said, I think I see what you're going here. And to just sort of preempt that, the situations that prevent me from gaming, I don't think would be solved by being able to take the games into another room.
They would not.
So
and why is that?
Well, just because those aren't the types of circumstances. It's not that I will just not have time to myself. That's what keeps me from gaming, rather than not being able to use the television. That's not my limiting factor here. Although, that could very well be the case for many others. I'd love to hear from everybody who's here live. If you could take your gaming off the television with your PlayStation, would that help you get your PlayStation time in? But also, Mr. Nice Guy, reverse card back to you, sir. Would that, being able to do it off the television help for you?
It's a great question. And what I would say is no. The reason why is because I have my Steam Deck, and there's an app on the Steam Deck called Chiaki, where you can literally do PS5 remote play on your Steam Deck. Additionally, there's the backbone controllers that many people use to connect to their phone, and you can use PlayStation that way as well, or PlayStation Remote Play that way as well. For me, it's really not that big a deal that this is coming out. I will say I like that it uses the DualSense controller, because the DualSense controller has such great haptics and such great features, and the mic built in, although so does the Steam Deck. It has a mic built in. But there's a certain level of immersion that comes from playing a game with that type of feature. Now, interestingly enough, people in the chat, Mets Girl, Ish Mobile, and others are talking about proprietary audio being bad, and I agree 100%. Mac, the idea that you would put out or that someone would put out a device in 2023 that does not support Bluetooth, and just to be clear, it has a 3.5mm jack that you can use any headset with. The part that's proprietary is the Bluetooth. It's not 3.5mm proprietary. It's the Bluetooth. You have to use a PlayStation headset to get Bluetooth, or somehow hack it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Mac?
Well, I am curious, Mr. Nice Guy. There are so far only 2 headsets that use that proprietary. Do we know how much they cost?
Yeah, and they're not out yet. So one is going to be similar to what I'm wearing. It's going to be a new version of the PlayStation. I forget the branding, but the PlayStation headset, like this, similar to this SteelSeries I'm wearing. And it is going to cost $149 if I remember correctly. Now, interestingly enough, they're also coming out with a set of PlayStation earbuds that are going to cost $199. So I just think it's interesting. I mean, Mac, the headset you're wearing, it looks like that's a 3.5 millimeter, but if you have Bluetooth headset, you can't use that. If someone has AirPods, they can't use that. Sony is really making you go all in. I don't know if there's a lot of debate here. I think it's a bad idea, and I think it's frustrating.
Yeah, it is definitely weird with such established standards to go proprietary. But I mean, and I assume there will be plenty of buzzwords from the, hype people about, oh, well, it's so that we can ensure that you get the correct and best experience. And it's not like the headset doesn't make a difference. I mean, I remember the first time I got some really good cans for my ears, and the first time I really used something that wasn't just kind of like garbage bargain bin, type of thing. And I think I might have cried a little bit because it was just so beautiful, man. But yeah, it can make a difference, but I find it difficult to believe that this is a situation that would make that happen.
I agree. And I mean, you know what? Sony is known for making tech, right? I mean, Sony makes TVs, Sony makes speakers. Yes, they make the PlayStation, but that's not how they started as a company. So I don't have any question that Sony can come out with good audio. The issue is just that so many people have other forms of audio that they're already using, right? I mean, part of the reason that I didn't buy the Sony headset is because it's not comfortable for my PlayStation. I went with the SteelSeries. I waited until it was on sale, and this is one of the best headsets that I've ever owned. Now, I also have a pair of AirPods that I use when I'm walking or jogging or something like that. It would be nice to be able to use those like I can with my Steam Deck over Bluetooth with this device. Now, Mac, I'm curious what you think about the pricing. Now, I know you're not a PlayStation 5 owner, but $200 for a device that strictly streams from your PlayStation 5. Your PlayStation 5 has to be turned on. You cannot do anything natively on this device. There's no, CP. Well, I don't know. There's stuff in there, but you cannot play any games directly on this device. There's no computer in there. $200 to be able to play in bed. Thoughts?
Well, I think that it will certainly have an audience, but that audience is definitely not me, for not just the reasons we've already sort of hinted at or listed, including but not limited to not having one, PlayStation that is, but also because, I have other methods of getting this type of experience in other ways that is a little less restrictive.
Yeah, I feel you with that. Now, it's interesting because as much as I love being able to do this on my Steam Deck, the Chiaki app is not perfect. I like once again the ability to have the DualSense controller attached to the thing, so you can get that haptic feedback, so you can get all the benefits that developers have put into making those games more immersive. But Mac, whenever and we've talked before about how we're ballers on a budget, right?
Oh yeah.
Whenever I see something like this, I think, okay, $200, what else could I buy for $200 that would potentially bring me more enjoyment or convenience than this device? And I think that there's a lot of things I could get that I would enjoy more than this when I already have alternative ways of getting this done with my Steam Deck or with my Backbone controller. So I don't know if this is for me until there's a sale on Black Friday, and I say, hey, you know what? I'll pick one of these up. It'll be nice to have in the collection. So, Mac, we've talked before about how less is more. We've got that one news story this week, man. That has been our news for the week.
All right. Well, let's turn now to what's going on, or what went on, rather, in years before. This week, in the years that came before, we saw the release of some fantastic games. I don't know if, I'm going to focus mostly on the later aughts. And I don't know if this will resonate with everybody, but at least a couple of you people out there, I'm sure. Released in 2009 for the Nintendo Wii, the Metroid Prime trilogy. Now, obviously, a lot more people have played the Metroid Prime games once they got that remaster later on. But the Metroid Prime on the Wii is the one that I've always wanted to have. It's hard to get a hold of now, but I've always wanted it because of the motion controls being able to be employed in that. I have Other M. I have played Other M.
What'd you think about Other M?
So I liked the game itself. I didn't like what I felt like how they treated Samus in the story, of sort of like bringing her in as this whole history of having time spent in the military and various boyfriend adjacent baggage. I felt like that they tried to sort of, cram in there. Sometimes I like my mysterious, badass bounty hunter destroying Metroids. That's kind of how. So it's just not the way that I saw her, basically.
Not my favorite Metroid game either.
Yeah, but the Metroid Prime trilogy, and what I did love about Other M was the usage of the motion controls for aiming, going into first-person view, shooting things, and going back to back and forth from first person to third person and so on. I found that to be really enjoyable experience, and so obviously I'd want the Metroid Prime trilogy because that sort of option I think would also be very fun. To anybody who happens to have a copy out there, maybe point your friend Mac in the right direction. Just saying. And then a trio of fantastic games released in 2008 this last week, Mr. Nice Guy, and in order of what I think is their importance. For the PC, a release of Euro Truck Simulator.
Okay.
This only features here because we have a viewer who is a big fan of Euro Truck Simulator, and who am I to not give the people what they want? Know nothing about it. Moving right along, 2008 released for the Xbox 360. Mr. Nice Guy, for you and me, my dude, Castle Crashers.
Oh yeah, great beat 'em up. Love that game.
Fantastic. I feel like Castle Crashers is just so very captures this moment in the late 2000s of what Xbox arcade games were. A question for you, Mr. Nice Guy. Very important.
Yeah.
Which of the stats did you go for first? Did you max out a specific stat on your Castle Crasher character first? How did you level up?
So I always tried to keep things relatively even, and it's been so long since I played, but I wanted a balanced character. To your point, though, like when I think Xbox Live Arcade, that's one of the first games that comes to mind. That and Splosion Man, if you remember that game, were two of the games that I feel like were staples on the system. And Castle Crasher is like one of those games you're not really thinking. You're just kind of having fun. You're hitting stuff. You're messing around with your friends. Great game.
Yeah, fantastic game. I always went for the speed or dexterity stat. I forget exactly how it was phrased. But made you move fast and also improved your damage from your ranged attack. So I very much did a lot of ranged attack. Almost didn't do the magic side of things whatsoever in Castle Crashers. But nonetheless, fantastic game. Absolutely. I don't know if I would necessarily call it formative, but it certainly, is just a perfect encapsulation. Well, now we move on to another game, somewhat formative. actually perhaps formative. A re-release, a fan remaster, if you will, of a game released for the PC, Quest for Glory 2.
Yeah.
The VGA style, right? So, like, Quest for Glory 1, 100%, foundational to my approach to video games, the things I like, the things I think are good in the point-and-click genre.
Sure.
But the first two Quest for Glory games were all both made EGA, which was more of a sort of parser-based. So, you would type in what you were looking for. And then Quest for Glory 3 came along, and around that time, they remade the first Quest for Glory so that it had this sort of parser, or this sort of point-and-click style of things for the first Quest for Glory game. And they also upgraded the amount of colors and the resolution from EGA to VGA, and, got that point-and-click. And that was the one for Quest for Glory 1 that was, truly my thing. And so it was always kind of sad because I'd go from point and click to parser in Quest for Glory 2, and then back to point and click the way it was meant to be for Quest for Glory 3, and then 4, and 5 changed things up a little bit, but we're not talking about that right now. It wasn't until some fans got together and leading up to 2008 went ahead and they updated Quest for Glory 2, put in lots of all the sorts of various Easter eggs, a faithful reproduction of Quest for Glory 2 that really, much in the same way that the first one, improved on the original, brought it up to date a bit better. Quest for Glory 2, Labor of Love, and really cool of the Coles and I guess Sierra, because they didn't choose to shut it down, for letting them do that. And it's free. You can pick it up. It's the best version of Quest for Glory 2, and I will fight you if you say otherwise, because it's the truth. Just come on out, and then I could have somebody visiting me from whom I could try to hide so that I would need the PlayStation Portal. So coming to fight me would really, in fact, be a help for both me and for Sony. Anyway, Mr. Nice Guy, I don't think Quest for Glory was one of your
It wasn't,
game,
and I feel like we've talked about other Quest for Glory games in the past in this segment.
Mm-hmm.
I've never played any of them, but you have such a love for them, I almost feel like I need to go back and do it.
I would encourage you, man. Go ahead, get Quest for Glory 1. I don't really much have the bandwidth for much streaming these days, but I could certainly make an effort to watch you stream Quest for Glory 1. I'd love it.
I'd love to check it out. We'll see what happens.
Well, that's what I had for history today. Let's not forget those awesome games that underpin what we have today.
Absolutely. And now it's time for our next segment, the Indie Game of the Week, a segment where we talk about a game that may need more attention and give our opinions on it. And Mac, this is a game that I'm really, really excited to talk about. I don't want to jump the gun, but this is one we got a while back. This is a developer who I reached out to and said, hey, can we get a copy of both games you've made? And they said, absolutely. And I've shared this story before. I think originally they sent me one key for each. And I said, hey, I actually have a business partner who I do the podcast with, a co-host. Can we actually get 2 copies of each? And they were like, absolutely, and sent both. So shout out to them for that. This week's game is called Prodigal. And if you're into indie games, I would encourage you to Google this now and bookmark it so you don't forget the name. Mac, here's the description for Prodigal, and then I want to get your thoughts. Released October 16th, 2020, so it's been out for a few years. Developer is Colorgrave, publisher is Colorgrave. Description says, grab your pick and strike out into a vibrant world of monsters, puzzling dungeons, and curious townsfolk. Can you unravel the mysteries of this old town and keep its people safe? It's time to return home. Vans Point needs you. Now, Mac, part of the reason we do this segment is because games are not getting enough attention. This one's almost 3 years old. It has very positive reviews on Steam, but only 205 reviews. People may remember we talked about Cursed Crackers, For Whom the Bell Tolls, a few weeks ago. This is the same developer. Mac, what did you think about this game?
Loved it. 10 out of 10. The depths of it, it just goes deeper. Amazing. Mr. Nice Guy, I know that you and I both share a love for the Legend of Zelda games, and in style, this has a lot in common. Substance, something a little bit darker. And you might be like, hey, Mac, how do you get darker than Ganon trying to bring darkness to the whole world and, destroy everything? Well, that would be telling, wouldn't it? But just take my word for it now that you can skim over a bunch of stuff and it's definitely darker. One thing that surprised me, though, is that it focuses on the town of Van's Point almost exclusively. There's like little side missions that you'll go on here or there, but for the most part, all your adventure is going to be confined to the area just around the main town.
Yep.
Which I wasn't exactly expecting.
Yeah, so this is a game, first of all, this is an amazing game. Link's Awakening is one of my favorite Legend of Zelda games ever, and this game is, I mean, it's 100% like a throwback to that, right? In fact, there's even one point where I feel like there's a cutscene that's a direct reference to Link's Awakening, and I don't want to spoil it for people, but I took a screenshot of it because I was like, oh, that's a reference to the intro to Link's Awakening. But anyway, just to be clear, this game right now is on sale for $3.74 on Steam.
Buy it now.
Yeah, this is a no-brainer if you like those types of games. Part of what I liked about this, Mac, is that this game does not have a big enough community for there to be guides. And so this is very much a figure it out type of game where, you're doing these little fetch quests, these side quests, where you go to someone and they're like, hey, I need a bat, but you got to go get it from so-and-so. And then you go to that person, they're like, I'll give you a bat if you give me some sugar so I can bake a cake.
Gonna need that library book.
Right, I need that library book. I need that cape. I need that carrot cake, like all kinds of different stuff. And you just kind of have to remember in your mind or take notes with your hand, like where to go, because there's not a guide that's going to help you do these side quests. Dungeons, very, very similar to Link's Awakening, and I loved that. The thing that makes this game so deep is that even the most insignificant of NPCs seem to have multiple lines of dialogue. There's just so much to talk to people about. They put this together perfectly. It's almost like when you're building a Metroidvania, you have to make sure that the person gets the double jump before they go to places where there's a double jump. They kind of built the dialogue that way. Like, the person has to have built up a certain relationship with this character before certain events can happen. And they made it so it's open world in a sense, but so that things happen in the order they're supposed to happen. Controls are super tight. There are so many collectibles, like multiple screens of things that you can collect. And much like Cursed Crackers, the amount of depth in this game is just unbelievable. Mac, I can't believe that these people aren't more well known, these developers.
Yeah. Oh, and one other thing that was really surprising, romance. Pick yourself a partner in the town. And, oh gosh, what was the name of the town again?
Van's Point.
Van's Point, yes. Pick yourself a partner in the town of Van's Point. And I will say one thing that did make me kind of sad is that there is an achievement for all the different pairings
Which
that
is
you
silly.
can do.
Which is silly.
Yeah, which I am just a little bit sad about because I was like, oh no. I don't want to have to replay it each time because I do like getting the achievements, but I didn't want to have to replay it each time for that. But yeah. And it's not like the most difficult bit of, romancing. It's a little bit less involved than, say, Stardew Valley romancing or building up rapport with characters. But, not by too frightfully much.
Yeah, a couple questions for you. So, what would you say about this game in terms of difficulty? And then what would you say about this game in terms of, and I forgot my second question. Oh, would you call this a cozy game? Like, would you call this like, oh, I'm stressed out type of game? Or would you say this is, the term cozy game, right?
I would say the part of the game that is most difficult is definitely going to be in some of the more advanced puzzles. Those lend themselves to that. Now, they do a pretty good job of showing you how it is that you can make use of your various equipments and power-ups to get through an area. But there are definitely going to be times where you're going to be sort of hitting your head against a wall, not really realizing how to do a thing, which is kind of something that I like. It sort of takes me back to that moment of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? My parents will whip me if I try and call the Nintendo hint line. So
because it's expensive.
That's not happening. Yeah. But what do I do? And it takes a little bit of struggle. And that's where I find it has some of the most difficulty.
And would you consider it a cozy game, or would you say it had a certain level of frustration that you wouldn't categorize it that way?
The only times where I got real frustrated were the times that I had to make it through an area without getting hit, because much in the same way, Prodigal and Cursed Crackers both seem to occur in the same game universe. There are some NPCs that they share in common, specifically some of the people you run into in sort of the outskirts of the game in late content. So that's how you know there's a connection. But in both Cursed Crackers as well as Prodigal, there is a crystal key that you can pick up that you'll need to open certain areas. And you have to get it from point A to point B without getting hit, and that is usually very tall order. And those were the times that I was just like, ah!
Yeah.
So, cozy game, you can certainly do things to make it a cozier game by, like, using your cash to buy some of the power-ups. You'll get, like, 3 not quite consumables
Buffs, right.
But they're sort of buffs that'll last until you overwrite them with another one. Like, for example, one buff is, you won't take damage when you fall in a dungeon through an open area, and boy did that save me from a lot of hearts taken, and things like that. So I would say cozy game mostly, but it does have its moments.
Yeah, so I played this on the deck, and I would say this is an ideal game for the deck. I am blown away that this game is not more well known in the indie scene, because it's phenomenal. I mean, it literally is like a 9.5 out of 10. I would say difficulty wise, some of the bosses just ridiculous in terms of how easy they were to beat. My only other complaint, and I almost gave him a pass for this, is I would have liked to have been able to customize the look of my character a little bit, just a little bit, because you're naming the character after yourself. At least I did. And at first I was kind of like, well, that's not that big a deal. They've done everything else perfectly. But then I thought about it. I thought, you know what? They gave so much attention to detail to everything else in the game. I would have liked to have been able to customize my character. However, I get it, because then you have to change what the parents look like in the game, and it kind of changes the whole vibe. But I thought that would have been a cool touch, to be able to make the character look like me. Other than that, I recommend this game without reservation, and for $3.74, you're going to have a blast with this. For full price, you're going to have a blast with it.
It would be, it's a bargain for what you get even at full price, much less 75% off. Gosh, you got to pick it up. And so far, Color Grave Studios has knocked it out of the park in both the games that they've published. And I do know that they're working on another one because they've, put out teasers and whatever. And I'm very optimistic about that third one. So, yeah, pick up Prodigal.
Support them, and they just put out Cursed Crackers on Switch. So, congratulations to them for that. That has been our indie game of the week. Please buy this game. Enjoy it.
All right. Well, now we turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off of the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart. I often draw from Kickstarter, but occasionally some of the other crowdfunding platforms. But what we are looking at today is a Kickstarter project. It's called Zero Space. It is a real-time strategy game, moving around military units much in the StarCraft vein of things. It includes hero units so that it plays kind of like Warcraft 3 with your heroes, 3 main modes, a campaign, a co-op, and a versus. But I do have here the line from this one that really has me wondering about how. How are they going to pull this bit off? Quote, a truly unique cooperative multiplayer base game mode that includes a shared persistent galaxy for an entirely new massive multiplayer experience. And it's possible that in the several videos that they embedded on their Kickstarter page, that they explain that in a bit more depth. Videos that I did not, real talk, have the time to go through, not between slicing up my fingers and burning my hands, but it is something that has me wondering what they're going for there, and if it is what I think that they're talking about, that Mr. Nice Guy, you and I might be able to play a real-time, an RTS game together, but there is a whole bunch of stuff that is persistent. What does that mean?
Right.
Does that mean that, like, the gold mines that we mined or whatever resources we mined on map A on planet Gliesa 581c3, that those mines are permanently reduced? I'm just not sure how you take take an RTS and make it a persistent type of thing without unbalancing areas. But it is an interesting notion, nonetheless. The polish, as Ishmael points out here, the polish does look phenomenal on this. The team also really enjoyed the vibe of games like Mass Effect, and so hopefully, though, their moral quandaries in this game, that's their term, lead to a bit more interest in the decisions at hand. I know that Mass Effect caught a lot of flack for your decisions not really making all that much difference in the end. Spoilers. But all of that, they kind of want to do it better. With this being all said, they're looking at a $35 minimum buy-in for a copy of the game on release. Now, they do say that that is expected to be discounted, so I suspect that means the launch price is going to be $40. Their prospective launch is May of 2025, and if you back at the higher levels, you might get access to the alpha, which would come in March of 2024, or the beta, which would come in December of 2024. Now, I've got some ideas on what I think the goods and the bads are here, but Mr. Nice Guy, anything jump out at you?
I agree with what you and Ishmael had to say, which is the polish looks awesome. One thing I'm always a little bit wary of is games where the polish is there and then the game ends up not being that smooth. Because a lot of people can make a really, really great cinematic trailer, right? I'm looking at this gameplay trailer. It's completely different than the cinematic trailer, and that's fine. But people need to know what they're getting. I'm scared about this game, Mac, and the reasons why are it's hard to come out with a new MMO today and get an audience when there's a $40 starting price. or when there's a subscription price. League of Legends is free. It's not an MMO, but I get it. Teamfight Tactics is free. Valorant is free. CSGO is free. World of Warcraft you can play free up until a certain level. Games like this that are so based on there being a community, you have to do everything you can to make sure your game has a community, or else it is going to fail. And yes, they have tripled, they're almost quadrupled their asking goal, but they only have 4,700 backers. And to me, that's a little bit scary for an MMO.
Well, I will say, to their credit, if you look at the team involvement, and this I think is definitely part of the good of this project, they have attempted to involve specific members of the RTS community. We've got people who are... now, I'm not a big part of the RTS community, so I'm taking their word for it, but a famous commentator in the StarCraft 2 scene, some other famous commentators in other real-time strategy scenes. It sounds like they're very much trying to, reach out to that community. I think very much to your point of this is a type of thing that rises or falls with the community.
I'll say this though, I think that it looks awesome. Like it looks like a game that I would give a shot, but with my attention being pulled so many different ways, and with people who are into this genre having their attention pulled so many different ways, I just don't know if it's gonna work. The thing about an MMO to me, Mac, is when people play MMOs, it's typically one of their main games. It's their go-to, right? People I know who play Fallout 76, like they're logging in at least a couple times a week to do dailies to play the game. Same thing with Destiny. Yes, you can pick it up and play it, but for the most part, there's a really hardcore audience that keeps coming back year after year after year. And so you've got to find a way to get that audience. Charging $40 for a new IP on Kickstarter, to me, or $35, is just not the way to do it.
I do have one other real positive thing I have to say about this, and then I have one additional sort of negative thing to throw. The last positive I do think is really worth giving them credit for. At the tail end of the Kickstarter, they lay out the system requirements for the game. Right there at the tail end, which I think is very good information to have, as well as a minimum system requirements and a recommended, which so long as they stay on track with what they're doing, what they're going for, it's good to know if you're backing a game. And this doesn't always happen with, say, a general indie game that we might see on Kickstarter that usually has much less system requirements. Something like this presumably will take a lot more oomph from your system. And so knowing how much you need is helpful for a circumstance like that. It also gives you an idea of what the game might be capable of in the future as well. But a big drawback for me is that, the polish looks good. The gameplay looks a little bit like it needs some work, but that's the point of setting your ship date is, March of next year or year after next, rather.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to see that they could bring it all together in a coherent package. Something that even if all it had was just a couple of factions and a level that we could give a go on, give us a playable demo. Show us that you can bring it all together. And sadly, this project, unless I'm very much mistaken, does not have a playable demo. And that, I think, is a big oversight in a situation like this.
Yeah, despite all the negatives that I've said, or rather the criticism that I've given, this looks really cool. And I mean, we don't get a lot of big budget games in this genre. I think that people who are into this genre, the real-time strategy, they're still playing, old games. Like, they're still playing StarCraft, they're still playing Warcraft 3. Maybe they're playing Age of Empires 4, which is newer, but we just haven't gotten something like this in a while, and I hope it gets an audience. we'll see what happens.
Well, for me, sadly, in this kick or kickstart world of ours, I have to say kick. I know that we've got at least one kickstart in the chat here. What about you, Mr. Night?
Super on the fence with this because it does look really good. It's hard to charge $35 for a game and then say it's going to be free to play at launch. But I almost feel like they should give founders packs to everybody who is supporting this and say, hey, it is going to be free to play. I understand that's shooting yourself in the foot because then people are like, well, why would I kickstart it? But I just don't know how they're going to keep an audience.
I don't think it's going to be free to play.
No, I know it's
going
not.
To be selling for 40 for. Oh,
I know,
sorry.
but no, you're good, man. But what I'm saying is, I feel like they should give some type of assurance to the community that people will be able to access this without having to pay to get in. Because if you're buying an MMO, your hope is that the game is going to be played for a while and be around for a while. And I just think that barrier to entry is going to stop that from happening. So I don't know. I'd have to kickstart. Or excuse me, kick. I'd have to kick it.
All right. Well, we wish you guys over at Starland Studios the best. And, well, I mean, Zero Space has already crushed your funding goal, so we hope you guys are able to bring the experience that you were hoping for, and we'd love to see it when it's done.
Best of luck to you. And now it's time for Nerd Flex.
Ooh.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the hosts. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. If you're here live, you have a job to do. Get your multiple choice gaming-related questions in the chat. Mac and I use nothing but our noggins to try to answer them correctly. We also have a test bank of questions that we use when the chat is feeling shy. Mac, last week was a sound test. This week, we have some questions from the test bank.
Well, if I may make a quick comment on the sound test.
Yeah.
We haven't had anybody claim any new ones, so out of our 40 sound tests that we've done so far, only 8 of them have been claimed. So, if you want if you want a prize crafted by us sent to you, you know what to do. But yeah, still plenty of unclaimed sound tests. So get on that, guys.
Yeah, get on that. So first question, Mac. This is a Rockstar Games question. And this is going to be a tough one. In what year was the first GTA game released? In what year was the first GTA game released? Mac, you're not a GTA person?
No, not a GTA person.
But I remember, I don't want to date myself, but I remember my friends and I getting into GTA 3 back in what would have been 2000 or 2001. So I know it was before that. And that was the third one. Now, the original GTA was like a top-down, get in the car, run around, bird's eye view type of game. So I'm thinking in the 90s, obviously, right? Maybe mid-90s? Mid to late?
Yeah. I'm inclined to agree with you, mid to late 90s, but I would just be throwing a dart at a board full of numbers, basically.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm going to go with 1997. I feel like 1996 was such a big year for games that if it had come out in that year, I don't know if they would have gotten a sequel. So I'm feeling like 1997, 1998. I'm going to go 1997. Do you want to go a different year?
Yeah, since it's not multiple choice, I suppose I can. I'm going to aim a little low and go for 1994.
Okay, let's see what it is. Oh my gosh, Mac. It is 1997. Dude, my logic worked.
Dude.
Let's go.
You
Let's
are
go.
crushing it, man.
Let's go. First answer is correct. Let's see what we get as we click the random question. So, Mac, this is a Zelda question, and if we've done this before, let me know. It's a Zelda one, like I said. What song must Link play to summon the great fairies in Ocarina of Time?
Pretty sure we've not, but I think I know this one. I think it's Zelda's Lullaby, which is a bit of a misnomer because, as they explain in Ocarina of Time, it's like the song of the royal family or whatever.
Okay.
Um,
I'm going to agree with you. I think Mac lagged for a second, but you still with us, Mac?
yeah, I'm still with you.
Okay, sweet. We'll go with your answer. And it is indeed Zelda's Lullaby. That one was easy.
Yeah, notice how when Lam gets one right, it's just like, let's go. When I get one right, it's just like, that was easy.
Well, because you're way better at this than me. Like, legitimately, you're just better at trivia.
Disagree, but it's kind of you to say.
Here's a red one. This is a tough one because they're color-coded. Metal Gear Solid. Who is Merle's spouse? Metal Gear Solid. Who is Merle's spouse? MERYL''S.
Okay, so if I recall properly, there's a girl named Meryl who shows up in the first Metal Gear Solid game, but I don't recall her being, attached to anybody. There was a sort of will they, won't they between her and Snake, so I guess it must have happened in the later games. That being said, I'm going to be absolutely wild and throw out there that she is married to, what is his name? Otacon or whatever in the first, another character that shows up in the first Solid Snake game, and the first Metal Gear Solid, that you can't actually, you kind of like have to pick saving one or the other. So, yeah. I'm gonna say him just because they appear in this similar context.
And I have not played the early Metal Gear Solid games, so I've started 5 and really enjoyed it. So I'm gonna go with you. I'll defer to you on this one, Mac. Let's see what the answer is.
I'm wrong, but let's see what it is.
Yeah, it's Johnny Sasaki, which is a very specific answer.
Johnny Sasaki.
That you would only know if you had really played that game. So. Hey, we went 2 for 3, and I will take that any day of the week. That has been Nerdflex.
Mr. Nice Guy, we do have a quick question from A.R. Wilson. Let's go for this if you don't mind.
Let's do it.
All right. A.R. Wilson asks, what year did Electronic Arts come into existence? So I'm thinking we're talking the 80s when Electronic Arts, incorporates. So do we think there were any Electronic Arts games for the Nintendo, Mr. Nice Guy?
Oh, that's a tough one. Like the original Nintendo?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that there were not.
Okay. Then I say we should probably air for, say, like early 90s then, and say like 91 or something like that.
Yeah, I would say 91 or 92. EA did a lot of early sports games, if I remember correctly. Yeah, let's go 91. What the heck? A.R. Wilson? Is that our final answer, Mac? Yep.
Yeah, final answer. What is 1991?
EA Sports.
It's in the game.
Oh, we were way off.
1982. Wow. Man, I can't think of any games previous to the Super Nintendo that were done by Electronic Arts, but hey,
and
we
keep
were
in
only
mind,
9 years off.
Nintendo didn't start out as a video game company, so I'll have to do some research on EA. Thank you, everybody. That has been Nerdflex.
All right, well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
I am not a lawyer, and I am especially not a lawyer in Greece. Now, last episode, I mentioned the video game ban of the early aughts that happened in the country of Greece. And while I had previously promised that I'd do a breakdown on another thing, this is the episode where I promised I would give you a breakdown on that. So, Mr. Nice Guy.
Yes.
As with many bits of legislation, there is usually a supposed purpose behind the law, like a specific problem we're trying to address.
Sure.
And in the case of the video game ban in Greece, Law 3037-2002, which was set into motion July 29th of 2002 and repealed August 22nd, 2011, so almost survived for an entire decade, was there for 9 years, the same number of years we were off on our answer about Electronic Arts. There was, in order to make electronic gambling illegal, the solution was to ban electronic games in public places or private places. So let me read just a little bit, and to be fair, to be 100% fair to Greece, I did have to run this through Google Translate because I only read English. So some stuff might have been lost, but, the Google Translate does a pretty good job with legalese. So it defines 4 different styles of what are considered games. And the first one is, a mechanically played game that requires a player's muscular strength.
Okay.
Category number 2, an electronically operated game where there are supporting mechanisms that are done electronically. Not exactly sure what falls into that bucket. Number 3, a lot more clear what falls into this bucket, an electromechanically conducted game. Operation requires both the presence of electric-supported mechanisms and the contribution of the player's muscular strength, which I think kind of is those ones where, like you punch the punching bag, or maybe even pinball, I think could possibly fall in there. Number 4, an electronically conducted game requires the existence and execution of program software, which kind of seems like almost literally everything else. And then a recreational technical game, which requires on the mental ability of the player and has exclusively a recreational purpose, which, I think probably one of those technical games where you stop the light in an area, that might pass. But of those 5 different categories, 2, 3, and 4, in which almost every video game we play nowadays would fall, would be prohibited. And what would they be prohibited from? Quote, it is prohibited to conduct the games, defined under Article 1, including computers, in public general centers, such as cafes, hotels, halls of recreated associations of any nature, and in any other public or private space.
Wow.
That sure seems to cover a lot, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Also, there is Article 3 talks about internet services, right? They're like, oh yeah, sure, you can have internet cafes, that's totally cool. But playing games with these computers, regardless of how they are played, is prohibited. So no video games on an internet cafe, that's against the law.
Weird.
Well, no law would be complete without some consequences for doing it. So the consequences come in 2 forms. For you, Mr. Nice Guy, as the proprietor of the establishment, and for me, Mr. Maction, as the one who's playing the video games. For you, imprisonment of at least 3 months and a fine of 5,000 euros.
Wow.
For the operators or managers of a place where it's done. And for the violators, imprisonment of 1 year and fine of between 225,000 and 75,000 euros for the violators.
For playing video games?
And of course, the confiscation of the devices. So this would not be the first time that there had been a overly broad law that had been written. Something that hit way more than was necessary. But unless there is some really big, nuance that I just don't get, it seems as though while the stated objective is to take care of illegal electronic gambling, this seems incredibly far removed from what the actual law says. Why that is, how many people were prosecuted under this, I don't know. That information was not especially easy to get a hold of. But it can't have been all that many people, because I feel like if they were rounding people up for video game playing, I feel like we would have heard more about it in the 2000s. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so.
But nonetheless, regardless of exactly how it was enforced, from 2002 all the way till 2011, in Greece, you'd better be careful about who sees you playing your Game Boy. I mean, 25,000 and a year in jail, not exactly what I expected to be telling people when they asked what was I in for.
This is so interesting because it's almost like, you ever hear those stories back in the day where someone will be like, did you know that it's illegal to take a bath on a Saturday in Mississippi?
Mm-hmm.
You know, just stuff like that. And I'm like, what? And then you look it up and it's true. And there's like some really weird law that states that. I mean, this is almost similar to that. Like, it was illegal to play video games in Greece, even in an internet cafe. Like, it's just so absurd to me.
Absurd. In any other public or private space, playing it in your hotel room, playing it in your own home, nope. Still a part of the ban on electronic games, which is, yeah. Anyway, all that being said, maybe there is some deficiency in the translation process. Maybe I'm being a bit too... and who knows, maybe not a single person was fined. But nonetheless, wildly overbroad law, and yeah, in place for 9 years. And last week in video game history was when it got repealed. But... you know, I'm not a lawyer in the U.S. I'm not a lawyer in Greece. That's not the law. It's just legalese.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode 280 of Two Nerds in a Pod. 20 episodes, still 300, Mac. Wow. What an accomplishment. For those listening from the Podcast Awards, thank you for considering our little indie podcast. We appreciate your votes if you choose to vote for us. And we have one last segment before we go called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that, the cool, nerdy stuff we've been into. If you're here live, you have a job to do. Let us know what you've been watching and playing. Mac, what you been into recently?
We've recently finished off Strange New Worlds. That's Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 1. I was a touch disappointed because I thought initially that it had 20 episodes in the first season, but it's only 10 episodes in the first season and like 10, behind the scenes episodes.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it went faster than I expected. Also watching Mentopolis, that's a Dimension 20 thing that's going on with Hank Green and Freddie Wong, two people that I particularly enjoy their tabletop style. And that's most of what I've been watching. As for playing, Vernal Edge is the one that I've probably been playing the most of lately. But I'm getting started on some other ones that we'll be talking about in the future.
Yeah, shout out once again to all the people who have given us games. There's really no way we can say how much we appreciate y'all wanting to hear our opinions, and providing us with these codes. In fact, Mac and I got a new one today that we will be talking about shortly. But I've been playing a lot of Prodigal, just because it's fun, but also in anticipation of today's discussion. Doing a little bit of Fallout 76 and a ton of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War Zombies with my friends. As far as what I have been watching, not a lot. Lots of YouTube videos on Steam Deck mods, and I've been getting into this YouTube channel called Retro Rick. He runs a game store. He collects old games. That's my jam right now on YouTube. As you know, I like to collect games as well. And I'll leave it at that for the week. Well, hey, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to episode 280. We appreciate y'all. Please be kind and be excellent to each other. Keep it nerdy, y'all. Deuces.
See ya.